Question: what similarities and differences do you see between the fourth way and non-dualism? And do they each have strengths and weaknesses? They both explain the same circle, with the goal of leading you to the center of it. Whereas the fourth way describes the circle in more detail, non-dualism concentrates right away on bringing the center of the circle into focus. The breadth of information in the fourth way can be overwhelming, so much so that it may distract you from the center of the circle. A lot of ideas can seem so important that they camouflage the significance at the center. But this is not a weakness of the system. It is a weakness of the mind studying the system. In contrast, non-dualism is fairly simple and direct. Go to the center of the circle and stay there. The drawback of this is with the mind's tendency to assume that it can think its way to the center, which it cannot, and for the ego to presume that it is awareness, which it is not. Only awareness can enter the circle of itself. But the mind is clever and the ego tricky, and it is easy to deceive yourself. The fourth way also uses precise language to describe the nuances of the ego. For example, it distinguishes between what the ego is at its roots, why it develops in the first place, how it forms, how it manifests psychologically, why it is so difficult to pinpoint, and what it means to transcend the ego. Non-dualism, on the other hand, speaks in terms of the mind and body, occasionally including the senses. Another difference is that non-dualism implies that self-realization is a single leap of awareness, whereas the fourth way describes degrees of awareness. For instance, that some people are interested in raising their awareness, whereas there are some in whom awareness is starting to self-realize, and some in whom it is realized, and some in whom it is fully transcended. The fourth way also includes a cosmology that explains our place in the universe, why humankind exists on Earth, what makes the evolution of consciousness possible, how the suffering of humanity ties into this, and more. Non-dualism does not provide such a large framework in the same degree of detail. Non-dualism also does not go into depth about or put emphasis on negative emotions, whereas the fourth way gives this a special place. The main idea is that negative emotions are the psychological backbone of the ego, and that not expressing them is a way of containing the energy behind the ego and using that energy as a catalyst for the transmutation of awareness. This process is akin to cocooning the caterpillar for the purpose of dissolving its constituent parts and reconstituting them as a butterfly. This is just an analogy, but it describes very well what we mean when talking about the ego, negative emotions, and the self-realization of awareness.